A man walks into a luxury hotel. He's in his 90s wearing plain jeans and a casual button-down shirt. He drives himself in an old pickup truck. He walks to the front desk, slides over his ID and credit card, and says he'd like to check in. The clerk looks him up and down, takes in the clothes, the age, the lack of luggage, the absence of any visible wealth signal. And then she does something that is going to haunt her for years. She tells him maybe he'd be more comfortable at the Holiday Inn down the road. What she didn't know, and what a computer screen was about to make brutally clear in front of 15 stunned witnesses, is that this old man in casual clothes had been staying at this exact hotel for nearly 20 years, that he was a Gold Elite VIP member, that he had over 127 recorded nights in their system, and that he was one of the investors who helped own the building she was standing in. This story went everywhere, and it's not just a celebrity gotcha moment. It's a masterclass in something most of us encounter or commit without even realizing it. A kind of invisible judgment that happens in seconds and costs more than any hotel rate ever could. Let's talk about what really happened that day and why it stuck with everyone who saw it. The setup nobody talks about enough to really understand why this incident landed so hard. You have to understand the context it happened in. The Meridian Grand in Beverly Hills is the kind of hotel that exists specifically to cater to people with money. Not the flashy, newly rich kind of money that announces itself with designer logos and sports cars, but the deep, quiet, established kind. The kind that doesn't need to prove anything. The kind that wears what it wants because it stopped caring about impressing strangers decades ago. The lobby is marble and crystal and velvet. The rooms start at $450 a night, not including taxes and fees. The staff is trained to provide seamless, frictionless luxury to guests who expect nothing less. And woven into that training, whether explicitly or just absorbed through the culture of the place, is a tacit assignment that front desk staff sometimes take on. Protect the hotel from awkward situations. Manage expectations. Make sure people understand what they're getting into before it becomes your problem at checkout. That's a reasonable thing to train people on, honestly. Hotels do occasionally deal with guests who book without fully reading the price, or who show up expecting something different from what they reserved. A good desk clerk notices early and addresses it professionally, but there's a version of that instinct that curdles into something else entirely. And that's what happened on this particular Thursday afternoon in June 2020. Ashley Reynolds was 26 years old. She'd moved to Los Angeles to break into acting. She was paying her bills working hotel reception while she went to auditions, as thousands of people in that city do. She'd been at the Meridian Grand for 8 months. She'd learned the clientele. She'd picked up, consciously or not, on the unspoken language of the lobby, the way wealth tends to dress itself in certain places, in the signals that separate the guests from the people who occasionally wander in thinking this might be their kind of hotel when it isn't. She had developed in 8 months a working internal model of what a Meridian Grand guest looks like. And when Clint Eastwood walked through those doors, he didn't match the model. What the lobby saw, Clint was 90 years old. He'd driven himself down from Carmel, which is a roughly 5-hour drive depending on traffic, because he had meetings in Los Angeles about his next film project. 2 days of meetings. He needed somewhere quiet to sleep between them. He'd booked a standard room online under his own name the week before. Nothing elaborate, just a clean, quiet room at a hotel he'd used dozens of times over 2 decades. He came in wearing jeans and a button-down. He was carrying a small overnight bag. He drove a pickup truck. Now here is the thing about Clint Eastwood that you need to hold in your mind for this entire story. He is one of the most financially successful and critically decorated figures in the entire history of Hollywood. He has directed and starred in films that collectively generated hundreds of millions of dollars. He has won Academy Awards. He has been, for decades, one of the most recognizable human beings on the planet. He also genuinely does not care what you think of his outfit. This is a man who has been wealthy and famous long enough that the performance of wealth holds absolutely zero appeal for him. He dresses for comfort. He drives trucks he likes. He doesn't surround himself with the visual armor of luxury because he doesn't need to convince anyone of anything. Which is, ironically, one of the truest signals of deep, settled wealth. People who've had money for a very long time often stop broadcasting it. They wear what they want. They drive what they like. They book standard rooms at nice hotels because they just want a place to sleep. Ashley didn't know any of that. She looked at this elderly man in casual clothes, made an assessment in about 3 seconds, and decided she was doing him a favor. The conversation that changed everything. She stopped him before he could complete check-in. "Sir," she said, in that carefully modulated, helpfully condescending tone that people use when they believe they're managing someone who doesn't understand their situation. "I should let you know, this is a luxury property. Our standard rooms are quite expensive." Clint told her he already knew. And he had made a reservation. The rate was listed when he booked. She pushed further. "Sometimes the online booking process is confusing and people don't realize the actual cost until they arrive. Our standard rooms start at $450 a night. That doesn't include taxes and fees," Clint told her again. He understood the rate. He'd like to check in. She told him that for the full 2 nights, with everything included, he'd be looking at over $1,000. And then she said the thing that turned a mildly uncomfortable interaction into something that 15 people in the lobby would remember for the rest of their lives. "There are some excellent hotels nearby that might offer better value. The Holiday Inn is about 2 miles from here. Very nice, probably around $150 a night. That might be a better fit." The lobby had been doing its usual lobby things up to this point. People on phones, people waiting for cars, a couple walking in from the parking garage. But there's something about a public conversation with a particular tone, that careful, slow cadence of someone talking down to another person, that acts like a tuning fork in a crowd. People notice. They stop. By the time Ashley said the words, "better fit," at least 15 people had quietly redirected their attention to the front desk. Clint's expression didn't change, but there was something in his eyes. The particular look of someone who has seen quite a lot in 90 years, who has already decided they're not going to raise their voice, and who is genuinely curious to see where this goes. "You think I can't afford to stay here?" It wasn't an accusation, it was an honest question. An invitation for her to either own what she was actually doing or retreat into politeness. "I didn't say that," she said. "I'm just making sure you're informed about our rates." "Because of how I'm dressed?" "I'm not making any judgments," she said. "I'm simply doing my job." And here's the moment that defines the whole story, because Clint Eastwood could have done several things at this point. He could have said his name, he could have raised his voice, he could have invoked his status as an investor or a VIP member or a Hollywood legend. He could have made this very easy for himself and very terrible for her in about 30 seconds. Instead, he slid his credit card a little closer on the counter and said simply, "Check me in, please. I understand the rates. I can afford to stay. I have a reservation." The lobby was completely quiet. Ashley, holding her hands now visibly shaking, began to type. The screen that said everything. She picked up his driver's license, entered the name Clint Eastwood into the system, and pressed enter. What came back on that screen is the part of this story that genuinely belongs in a movie. VIP Gold Elite member since 2001. Total lifetime stays, 127 nights. Preferred guest rate program participant. And at the bottom, in the special notes field, hotel ownership group investor. Notified general manager immediately upon check-in. Ashley's face went from pink to white in about 2 seconds. In the back office, general manager David Chen had his system set up to ping him whenever certain guests checked in. The alert for Clint Eastwood came through with a distinctive chime. David pulled up the security feed for the front desk, saw Ashley frozen at the computer, saw Clint waiting, saw 15 people in the lobby watching in various states of stunned stillness, and immediately understood everything he needed to understand. He practically ran out of his office. "Mr. Eastwood, welcome back. I didn't know you were checking in today, or I would have been here personally." Clint looked over at Ashley and said, with the same calm he'd maintained the entire time, "Your desk clerk was concerned I might not be able to afford to stay here." David's face completed the same color transformation Ashley's had moments earlier. She suggested the Holiday Inn might be a better fit. More in my price range. The silence in the lobby at this moment was the specific kind that happens when everyone is collectively holding their breath. And when whatever is happening at the center of the room has reached a point where nobody wants to miss a single word. David turned slowly toward Ashley. "Ashley, did you suggest that Mr. Eastwood One of our most valued guests and an investor in this hotel should stay at a Holiday Inn? Ashley was holding the driver's license like it was a piece of evidence she wished she'd never touched. She couldn't speak. She just stood there. What he did next is the whole point, and this is where the story earns its reputation. Because David Chen, GM of a luxury hotel, was ready to make an example, ready to issue whatever consequences fit the moment. The staff member in question had just told a co-owner of the building that he couldn't afford to stay in it in front of 15 guests on the record. The natural next move, from a management perspective, it was swift and decisive. Clint stopped it. She was doing what she thought was her job, he said. David started to respond. Clint kept going, managing guest expectations, making sure people understand what they're getting into financially before they commit to a stay. By judging guests based on their appearance, David said quietly. It wasn't a question. By judging me based on my appearance, Clint corrected. And then he looked at Ashley directly, who was by now openly crying. You assumed I couldn't afford to stay here because I'm an old man dressed casually, driving an old truck. You made a judgment based on external factors that told you nothing about who I am or what I can afford. That's a mistake, but it's a correctable mistake if you learn from it. Ashley told him she hadn't recognized him. You thought I looked poor. Say it. She said it. I thought you couldn't afford it. I'm so sorry. Don't apologize for thinking it. Apologize for acting on it. Everyone makes assumptions. The question is whether you let those assumptions determine how you treat people. He let that land. You told me about Holiday Inns and better fits and price ranges because you judged my worth by my clothes. Learn from this. Every person who walks through those doors deserves the same professional courtesy. Whether they're wearing a suit or jeans, whether they drive a Ferrari or a pickup truck, whether you think they're rich or think they're poor. He picked up his credit card and license. Now I've had a long drive. I'm tired and I'd like to check into my room. Why this isn't just a celebrity story. When this story spread, most people's first instinct was to file it as a celebrity gotcha. Famous person gets underestimated, turns out to be famous. Lesson learned. The end. But that's the wrong frame entirely, and it misses what made the moment actually remarkable. The part that mattered wasn't that Ashley didn't recognize Clint Eastwood. Recognition isn't the standard. Recognition is not the metric by which we decide whether a person deserves respect. The part that mattered was the gap between what Ashley knew and what she acted on. She knew nothing about this man. She knew he was old. She knew he was dressed casually. She knew he drove a truck. That was it. That was the entire data set she used to construct an assessment of his financial situation, precise enough that she felt comfortable directing him to a different hotel. That is a staggering leap, and most of us make versions of it constantly, in ways we don't even track. There is a piece of psychological research that describes this as thin slicing, the way human brains make rapid, confident judgments based on minimal information. We evolved to do this. In certain contexts, reading a situation fast is genuinely adaptive. But in social contexts, especially when we're in a position of power over someone's experience, whether as a hotel clerk or a salesperson or a doctor or a hiring manager, that same instinct becomes a machine for producing unfair outcomes. Ashley wasn't a bad person. She wasn't even consciously prejudiced in any deliberate way. She had absorbed a set of shortcuts from her environment, from her training, from 8 months of working in a lobby where wealth had a particular visual signature, and she applied those shortcuts without pausing to question them. The result was that she treated a 90-year-old man like he was in the wrong building. And the fact that he happened to be Clint Eastwood is almost incidental to the lesson. The lesson would be just as true and the behavior just as wrong if the man in the jeans and button-down had been a retired teacher from Ohio who had saved up for a special trip and didn't own a single piece of designer clothing. Every person who gets steered toward the Holiday Inn because of what they're wearing is having a version of this experience. Most of them don't have a computer screen that lights up with investor status to save them. The 15 witnesses. Let's talk about the 15 people in that lobby for a second, because they're part of this story too. Those 15 people came to the Meridian Grand as guests. They were there for their own reasons, their own trips, their own lives. And then they got pulled into this front row seat to one of the more extraordinary scenes any of them had probably witnessed in a hotel lobby. They watched a young woman make an assumption and act on it. They watched the assumption dissolve in real time as the computer screen told a different story. They watched a general manager sprint out of his office. They watched a famous man stay calm through the whole thing. And they watched him, when he could have destroyed someone's career in 30 seconds, choose instead to give her a lesson. Several of them posted about it on social media that same day. The story spread fast. It hit every corner of the hospitality industry. It hit the broader conversation about implicit bias. And it hit the ongoing cultural discussion about how wealthy people who don't look wealthy are treated differently. And by extension, about how people who genuinely can't afford certain things are treated as though their financial situation is a moral failing that justifies lesser service. David Chen, to his credit, took it seriously. He didn't treat the incident as a PR problem to manage. He treated it as an institutional failure, a sign that his training program had created conditions where a staff member felt empowered to make this kind of call on the floor, in public, with real consequences for a real guest. He overhauled the training. He introduced explicit material on implicit bias, on the danger of appearance-based assessment, on the difference between managing legitimate guest confusion and gatekeeping based on stereotypes. His framing of it became something of a quote: "If Clint Eastwood can be judged as too poor for this hotel based on his clothes, then our judgment system is broken. We serve people, not outfits." Ashley's side of the story. Ashley was not fired. She spent 2 more years at the Meridian Grand on probation and undergoing additional training before she finally landed an acting role that launched the career she'd moved to Los Angeles to build. She talks about that day in interviews now. Not as a funny story about accidentally insulting a Hollywood legend, though she acknowledges that's what it looks like from the outside. She talks about it as the moment she was forced to confront something about herself that she hadn't been willing to examine before. She has said that she thought she was helping, that in her mind, once she was performing a service, saving this man from an embarrassing situation at checkout, from the moment where the credit card gets declined and everyone is awkward. She had good intentions layered over bad assumptions, and she didn't realize until a computer screen made it impossible to ignore that the assumptions were doing all the work. "I looked at an elderly man in casual clothes and decided he was poor," she said in a podcast interview a few years after the incident. "I didn't see a person. I saw a category, and I acted on the category." She has talked about what it felt like to hear Clint Eastwood say, "Don't apologize for thinking it, apologize for acting on it," because it reframed the entire thing for her. The instinct, the initial unconscious assessment, that's human. That's wiring. You can work on it, you can train your awareness, not good, but the flash of categorization that happens before your conscious mind catches up, that's not something you can fully eliminate. The choice of what to do with it, though, that's yours. She made the wrong choice in a public lobby at a luxury hotel, and a 90-year-old man in jeans chose to use that moment to teach her something instead of punish her for it. She says it's the most formative professional experience she's ever had. More than any audition, any role, any acting class. The lesson about what it costs to judge people by their surface, and the lesson about what grace actually looks like under pressure. Both delivered in about 4 minutes in a Beverly Hills hotel lobby. What Clint Eastwood understood that most of us don't. Here's the part of this story that I keep coming back to. Clint Eastwood is 90 years old in this moment. When he has been famous for over 60 years, he has been wealthy for almost as long. He has lived long enough and deeply enough to have shed any need to prove himself to a hotel clerk or anyone else. And yet the way he handled that interaction shows a level of emotional intelligence and self-possession that most people, regardless of age, regardless of experience, would struggle to replicate. He didn't escalate. He didn't name drop. He didn't threaten. He didn't perform outrage for the audience that had gathered in the lobby. What he did was stay exactly himself. Calm, direct, clear. He pushed back on the behavior without vilifying the person. He named what was happening. "You're judging me by my clothes," without converting it into an indictment of her character. And then, when he had every justification to let management handle it harshly, he advocated for her, She was doing what she thought was her job. It's a correctable mistake if she learns from it. That sentence is doing an enormous amount of work. It acknowledges that Ashley did something wrong. It acknowledges that the wrong was real enough to have real consequences, but it refuses to define her by the mistake. It frames the mistake as something that can be learned from, grown past, corrected. That's not the instinct of someone performing generosity for an audience. That's the instinct of someone who has genuinely thought about what mistakes are for. There's also something worth noting in the specific lesson he chose to give her. He didn't say, "You should have recognized me." He didn't say, "You should have done more research on your VIP guests." He didn't say, "You should have been nicer to rich-looking people." He said every person who walks through those doors deserves the same courtesy, regardless of clothes, regardless of car, regardless of what you assume about their finances. The lesson isn't about recognizing wealth. It's about not using wealth, or the appearance of it, as a prerequisite for basic human dignity. The deeper thing. Nobody says out loud. There's a version of this story where the lesson is, don't judge wealthy people by their clothes, because they might be richer than you think. That's the shallow version. And it's worth pushing past it, because that framing still locates the problem in the misjudgment of wealth, not in the judgment itself. The real problem isn't that Ashley was wrong about Clint Eastwood's finances. The real problem is that she was treating his perceived financial situation as relevant information for how much courtesy he deserved. The question underneath all of this is, why does any of that matter? Why should the level of professional respect and courtesy a guest receives at any hotel or any business or any public space vary based on the clerk's guess about how much money they have? The answer, of course, is that it shouldn't. But it does. It does constantly, everywhere, in ways that go far beyond hotel lobbies. People get followed in stores. They get talked over in doctors' offices. They get skipped at car dealerships. They get shorter answers and less patience, and fewer second chances and more assumptions of bad intent, all calibrated in real time by 100 micro-assessments of how they look and where they seem to fit. And the people on the receiving end of this don't usually have a computer screen that pops up with VIP Gold Elite status to rearrange the situation. They just get the shortened version of every interaction, the lesser treatment, the Holiday Inn redirect, and then they go on with their day carrying something small and exhausting that they weren't carrying when they walked in. Clint Eastwood had the resources, the reputation, and the composure to turn this moment into a lesson. Most people don't. Most people just absorb it. What stayed in that lobby? The elevator doors closed, the lobby exhaled, and then 15 people who had just watched something genuinely unusual happen went back to their days. But they didn't forget it. You don't forget something like that. The image of a 90-year-old man in jeans, Henri, who had just been offered the Holiday Inn by a clerk in a marble lobby, standing at the center of a crowd of witnesses and refusing to use the moment for anything except a lesson in how to treat people. That stays with you. David Chen has talked about the incident since, carefully and without using names he doesn't have permission to use, in conversations about hospitality training and institutional bias. He frames it as the most clarifying day of his management career. Not because the lesson was new, but because seeing it play out live in front of guests made concrete something that often stays abstract in training rooms. The policies you build, the culture you cultivate, the shortcuts you train your people to take, all of it has a face on it. All of it eventually walks through a door in jeans and a button-down and finds out what you really believe about who deserves respect. Ashley found her career. She left the Meridian Grand 2 years after that Thursday afternoon and started building the life she'd come to Los Angeles for. She's talked about the incident enough that it's become, in its own odd way, part of her professional story. Not as a source of shame, but as an origin point. The moment she was forced to look at a blind spot she didn't know she had. When she sees Clint Eastwood in the Meridian Grand lobby now, he nods. She nods back. That's the whole thing. Two people, 90 and whatever age she is now, who shared 4 of the strangest and most formative minutes of both their Thursdays, acknowledging each other across a lobby. As he taught her something she didn't ask to learn and didn't want in the moment. She took it anyway. The cost of judging people by their appearance is not a hotel bill. It's not a VIP status reversal. It's not a dressing down from a general manager in front of 15 witnesses. It's something quieter and more lasting than that. It's the slow erosion of every interaction you poison with an assumption you made in 3 seconds and never questioned. And the cure for it isn't recognizing famous people. It's deciding every single time that the person in front of you deserves your full professional courtesy, regardless of what you think you know about them from a 3-second scan. That's the lesson from a Thursday afternoon in Beverly Hills, delivered by a man in jeans who just wanted to check into his room. If this story made you think about the assumptions we carry without realizing it, hit the like button and subscribe for more stories like this. And drop a comment. Have you ever been judged as not belonging somewhere based on how you looked? Or been the one doing the judging without realizing it until later? That conversation is worth having.